Good evening. I'd like to call the Planning Commission of the town of Chincoteague to order. I'd ask you all to stand for the invocation of pledge of allegiance.
Dear Lord, thank you, Lord, for allowing us all to gather here tonight, Lord. We're very blessed to live on this island, Lord. May everything that you hear here tonight, Lord, all the decisions made, Lord, be for the betterment of this island and its people, Lord. And all these things we pray, Lord, in Jesus' heavenly name. Amen.
Amen. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Well, I must say, this is a little bit of a shock for the Planning Commission. Welcome you all. Before I open the public participation portion of the meeting, in council meetings, there's time limits placed. We won't place a time limit on your speaking, but I would ask you to be reasonable in the amount of time you do spend addressing the issues you have brought before us. Having said that, I have a list of those who would like to speak. And Denise Bowden, number uno.
Well, I went over this, and it's like 45 minutes. No, I'm just kidding. I will say I'm not used to being on this side of the podium, but I'm coming before you tonight as a citizen to address the possibility of some marshlands being filled in on our island. There is talk, rumor if you will, of a section of marshland on east side that could be in jeopardy of such a thing. In order for a person to fill in the marshlands right now, they have to jump through some hoops. And some may argue that that process is too strenuous and people don't want to go through the process. But if someone has the stamina, the know-how, and the means to jump through those hoops, it's entirely possible to obtain the necessary permits to do so. First, the owner must go through the JPA process. JPA stands for Joint Permit Application, which consists of approval from the Army Corps of Engineers, the Virginia Marine Resources Commission, and the local Wetlands Board. If the owners are successful in obtaining these permits, then by our code, the town's code, they have the right to do a number of things on that marsh, which include game preserves and conservation areas, fish hatcheries and fish ponds, wildlife, waterfowl ponds, drainage, erosion, and flood control devices, wells, water reservoirs, and water control structures, accessory structures. There's no meaning behind that, just as accessory structures. Seafood and shellfish landing, receiving, storage, and shipping facilities, aquaculture and mariculture facilities and activities, commercial kayak and boat rental facilities, public parks, recreational areas, marinas, and other public buildings, and last, or not quite last but not least, lodges, hunting clubs, and boating clubs, and it also includes fences. The town code has marshland zoned as RC, which stands for Resource Conservation. Conservation meaning to prevent a wasteful use of a resource, and also meaning an act of protecting Earth's natural resources for current and future generations. As we all know, years ago, the powers that be, and none of us sitting here were on these boards years ago, I guess they didn't understand what conservation meant, and we can very well see that by the way the west side of our island is looking. We have a chance to save what little bit is left of east side. According to our town code, the following is permitted, which I read right in there. I'm asking that this planning commission send to council a revision of Section C, Resource Conservation, Section 5.7, that would remove the following: accessory structures, commercial kayak and boat rental facilities, especially if there was a structure to be built with that, lodges, hunting clubs, and boat clubs. As we know, the seafood industry has been on a decline. If it wasn't for Mike McGee and Tommy Clark, we wouldn't have much of a seafood industry right now. They both have areas in place where, they bring their loads ashore. Kayaks and boat rental facilities are dotted along and things like that. Lodges and hunting and boat clubs. All these boys go up to bay every summer, every winter. And I would also like to see an added prevention for filling in any marshland for parking. What's there is there now. Once you lose it, it doesn't come back. You're never going to get it back. I believe this to be not only important for the future of Eastside, but also for the entire town. And I want to be clear, very clear to everybody listening to me and you all up here, as a citizen and as a council member, I have no issues with growth, but I have a whole lot of issues with irresponsible growth. And the things that have been going on, to me, haven't been very responsible in some senses. Although things are permitted by right, doesn't always make them right. Thank you.
Tammy Riley.
I just kind of wanted to address the board for the same reason. I agree with everything Denise said. I do feel that I don't understand how you could even possibly begin to fill in marshland to make a parking lot. I just think that's asinine. The town several years ago had talked about bulkheading east side end to hold the road, to make sure that the structure stayed there so that we had that road. If somebody's allowed to do that, to fill in and make a parking lot, put a house at the end of it, how is the town going to get there to fix that road if something happens? If that road fails, what do we do then? So I have a real problem with somebody that's just going to come in, they've got a bunch of money, oh, just let me buy all this marshland, and I'm just going to ruin it all and fill it in. I'm going to put me a big house up there, and I'm going to have water and electricity. I'm going to rent it and make lots of money. Well, how about all the other people that have lived here their whole life and paid these taxes? They have that view, and they want to keep it. I just feel that it's just not right for someone to do that. And the wildlife, the abundance of wildlife that is out there, we know what we have on Main Street. On East Side, we have the exact opposite. You can ride by there and see the beauty, the abundance of wildlife, the lighthouse, the Elder Hostel, and the other group that comes, I forget what they're called, Road Scholars. They're constantly going by there. That's the first place they take them, to see how beautiful our land is. How beautiful is it going to be when you can't see it? So that's my 2 cents there. Thank you very much, and I hope you take it into consideration.
Thank you, Tammy. Miss Peggy?
Yeah, I guess you can hear me. Anyway, I've lived in the house that I'm living in now for 88 years. I lived on Pawnee Island probably 2 years. But I've never seen anything obstruct that lighthouse in 88 years. And I would like to say, I wish that you all would take into consideration how long I've been there. My house come from Assateague Beach. It's over 100 years old. And I'm used to being there, and I don't want to go nowhere else. And I'm too old to go anywhere else. But anyway, please take into consideration that we don't want nothing built out there. We'd like from Billy Ann Bowden's house almost to Tar Lane, that's the only open marsh and waterway you see. The west side, you don't see nothing till you get to the carnival green. And I tell you the truth, it makes me sick when I think of what I've seen change here. It makes me sick to see the changes that's took place in here since I've been born. So I appreciate it if you all would take that very much into consideration.
Thank you, Ms. Peggy. Bill Ott?
7827 East Side.
Bill Craig?
Oh, okay.
There you go, sorry.
Hey.
Yeah, I live.
The eyes are big.
Yeah, I'm 2 houses down from where he's
Yeah.
proposing this. I don't think it's right. I bought this house 15 years ago. I love the view. I love everything about it. If you would just sit in my yard one day and listen to the people riding their bikes past the house, they want to sit there and look at it. They take pictures. They pull my driveway to take pictures. If we lose that little space, just that little space, it's gone. And I don't like it. I really don't like it. And then what's going to happen? We flood back there. If they build some kind of structure there, is that going to affect my house? I'm 3 blocks high. Is that water going to come around and sit in a puddle in my yard? So it's really kind of, I just found out about this yesterday morning. And I just wanted to attend to say, hey, I don't think it's right. and put that into consideration. I mean, you know, there's a lot of people that come here and just go, God, this is beautiful. Just that little space. You know what I mean? So that's what I got.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Billy Ann Bowden.
Well, I lived on the east side, not quite as long as Peggy has, but I'm getting close to her. Where I'm living at now, I've lived 3/4 of my 77 years. It was left to me. I could have sold it. I already had a home on Ridge Road. I could have sold it. But because of the lot size, the location, and the view, we decided to sell our other home and move over there. My aunt and uncle owned it. Her father owned it, and I'd like for it to stay in our family. As far as a dock, I don't have no problem with a dock. That's a low impact. But when it comes to structures and filling in alongside the road, I have a problem with that. I can't hardly imagine a car being parked on that side of East Side. I used to have a boat, and I'd paddle up and down East Side Road in the marsh. So, like I say, a dock I have no problem with. There's a gentleman already has a small dock down there. It's no problem. But with structures and parking, I do have a problem. So before things gets too far into this planning, because this might just be opening a door for something else. The gentleman might have bigger and better ideas a few years down the road, but I think it's time to nip it in the bud now. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bowden. Kathleen. Okay, Kathleen. Come on now.
Hello. I do not live down here permanently. This is my second home, but I consider it a home. Like so many other people that do have homes down here that are their second home. And I am concerned about filling in a beautiful marsh that I see every time I come down here, or ride my bicycle, or walk with my grandchildren down East Side. It is beautiful. Why would you do such a thing? Fill in areas that are for wildlife. I don't see that this should be even a possibility. And like the other gentleman said, we have flooding on that side. What is that going to do? We could be looking into something else. I'm already like right there on that flood zone. What is going to happen with something else there? Why would you even consider such a thing? And like as Billy Ann, my neighbor, said, a dock is no big deal to me, but a home and people coming in and out of there and filling up this beautiful marsh that we have, this natural thing that we have, and you're going to take that away? And what's going to happen? Is that going to be a snowball effect? It's going to go and go and go? Well, we got this passed. Let's try this. Let's stop this now before it gets too far. I'm hoping that this will be my retirement home. You know, I want to enjoy that marsh, those little birds out there. I want to hear the gulls. I don't want this. I don't want it. You know, but I'm just one person. I don't live down here permanently. But this is my home, too. This is my second home, a place I love. And I love what I see in front of, sitting on my porch. Please don't take this away from me. Don't take it away from your permanent citizens. Thank you.
Thank you. You're next. I'll let you introduce yourself.
I'm Sonia Watson Concert.
That's Sonia.
It is Sonia. I apologize for my handwriting. So I'm just going to echo my fellow East Siders here and just talk about my dad bought that house in 1974 and grew up with that absolutely gorgeous view that, let's face it, as a kid, it didn't mean a hill of beans to us. But I have the privilege of living in that house. I've remodeled it, and it is a fantastic, wonderful thing to the perspective of the beauty of what I didn't think was a cool thing to grow up on a small island. I can't imagine putting anything, maybe a dock, but I can't imagine someone wanting to fill anything in there. I think it's one of the last smaller, gorgeous spots on the island. I really do. And the number of cars that stop at the end of Wayne Road and take pictures, and the full moons and the sunrises, I just think it would just, anything that would obscure that gorgeous view of Assateague, I think would just be an absolute, I don't even want to call it a shame. There's other words for that, but so I plead with you, along with everything that Denise had said, and please limit what can go on out there. Let's save the great pieces of Chincoteague that we have left.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else that didn't have an opportunity to sign?
I would like to say something I didn't sign.
Come on up.
So I'm Robert Watson, for the ones that don't know me, and
That's my brother.
naturally that's my sister, and that was my father's home. So, you know, I was actually moved there when I was 5 years old. So it's a lot of history actually on the east side, period. And for those that don't know the history of that side of the island, east side affects even Ridge Road. As developments have been introduced and built in what used to be the woods on the north side of Wayne Road, all of that drainage used to run into the ditches on Wayne Road and ran out to the marsh on east side. A lot of that has been filled, and now a lot of that floods. So the property that she's talking about at the end of Wayne Road, I actually own. So the lighthouse growing up meant a lot to me, even as a kid. I could tell you that it would blink once and then two times right after it, because some nights I couldn't sleep because of the light. But I bought that property for one reason. My father, which of course had been there since 1974, was so afraid that when that was bought and divided, that somebody was going to build a dock and put a boathouse up on it. So I purchased the property. So I invested $45,000 in that marshland that today I have no interest in doing anything with it. A dock is not a bad idea, it wouldn't bother me, but my interest in that marshland was for my father. And now he has passed and he is gone. But I would like to say that, I'm like everybody else. I really wish we would consider the island and what's left of the marshes around the island, not just east side. Because when is enough enough? I live in Salisbury now. I own property here, and I own property in other places. But this is my home. This is where I come every weekend. When my dad was alive, I came over to have breakfast with him on Saturday and Sunday. And to change not only east side, but other areas. The east side is a very special side of the island, in my opinion, because we are known for the Assateague Lighthouse. You have the pony swim on that side of the island. And, like my sister said, when people do ride down the Wayne Road, if you had a dime for every car that stopped and got out and took pictures of that view, and I own that property there, and I'll tell you, I'm never going to do anything with it. That's why I bought it. So I've already invested money in that for nobody to develop it, period. Growing up, they had to build up east side because it used to flood and it would flood bad. So the town has spent a lot of money building that side up. And I can't remember how many cars have been pulled out, but I can't imagine developing that side for any type of parking, which would prevent even more drainage from going out or filling any marshland. So, just thanks for your time. I'm kind of along with everybody else. Just please take that in consideration.
Thank you. We're going to close the public participation portion of our meeting. I'm going to make a statement. Oh, Mike, come on.
I
I got one question. My name's Mike McGee. I've owned about 6 oyster houses on the eastern side, and still there. Why did all this come up? I've never heard nothing like building on that marsh. It's literally impossible, dealing with the Army Corps. But can somebody tell me how it come up that we're going to fill the marsh in or put a parking lot in? Start with the town doesn't allow it. You allow a dock. I go along with that, but I don't know where it come out. Matter of fact, I come here and I made a mistake and thought it was the Board of Zoning night. That's why I'm here. That's right. But can somebody answer that question for me?
It has been no applications applied at this time to fill. There is a guy that is proposing to fill in a 8 by 10 foot parking spot on the end to put a water meter and to put a dock out to the end of Sheepshead Creek. That's all that has been talked about. Nothing has been, I talked with the MRC last week, nothing has been applied to them this date. They did have some changes there, so the new personnel is talking to the old personnel to see what the site visit was about and what the flags are about. I haven't got the information back yet.
Yeah, because I knew you could put a dock out there, but not. The town outlawed the boathouses.
Right, you can only put an open structure on the end of the dock now.
But I'll go along with that open, even with that, but a dock. But I'm glad I found out what it's all about.
Mr. Red, this letter my neighbor sent, she says she sent it to Mr.
Enter that in our minutes.
Talbert. Have you all seen it?
No.
Miss Peggy, I'm supposed to read. I'm supposed to read that. I forgot. I'm sorry. I can read. And this was sent to my attention yesterday. Okay. This is from Kate and Dan Ingersoll. Dear Mr. Talbert, we write this letter in regard to recent news that a long pier and building with water and power and parking will be constructed in and over the marsh in front of the Miss Peggy Thomas's house on East Side Road on Chincoteague Island. We are adjacent property owners at 7811 East Side Road and also own the property across the road into the marsh and to the creek. Our property has a very short, low walkway previous owners constructed to launch their kayaks. It is our understanding that a loophole in the town code related to resource conservation could potentially allow this new robust project to be permitted. We question the validity of a series of loopholes that allows construction over wetlands and marsh in an environmentally sensitive area across from the U.S. National Park and suggest the loophole was, in fact, designed to protect those areas rather than develop them. View shed rights adjacent to the U.S. National Parks have long been protected in many instances, and in order to preserve the beauty of natural and cultural landscapes for all to enjoy. The construction of any sort of building, residence, or bath or boathouse will effectively block the view shed, not only for Mrs. Thomas, but for all living along Eastern Side Road. It would also affect residents and tourists who routinely drive around the island to see the Assateague Lighthouse. And finally, and perhaps most importantly, as rich habitat for numerous species and submerged aquatic grasses, marshes are the very heart of our island. Please think twice about allowing a variance that would compromise the extraordinary natural diversity of the island and close the loopholes, eliminating 5.7.5, 5.7.8, and 5.710 in the code book. That would allow this and future large-scale development over the wetlands by others owning marshland along East Side Road. We have previous appointments to keep us from attending this meeting on May 9th and hope this letter conveys our grave concern. It is our wish that this letter be read aloud at the meeting and that this is forwarded to the Planning Commission. We look forward to hearing from you in this regard. And that is signed again, Kate and Dan Ingersoll.
Thanks, Mike. Well, I'll go back to, I'm going to close the public participation portion of the meeting. But I want to say this. The second item on our agenda is a comprehensive plan, at which time it was my intent to address the question of the marsh area that was raised at the council meeting, the most recent council meeting. So I will forego any comments relevant to your comments until that portion of our meeting. And so at that point in time, I would like approval of the minutes.
So moved.
I second. I have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
So moved. And the first item on our agenda is consideration to the residential area requirements or adjustments to residential area requirements, which we started to address that as a result of the new structure that was placed down on Church Street. It was kind of higher than the surrounding buildings, and our town manager and Mark have worked together and come up with at this point, a proposal.
You'd like me to go through it?
Yes, please.
Okay, sir. As Mr. Rosenberger stated, the issue came up about a structure that was built that seems to be quite a bit higher than the other structures in the neighborhood, and the question came about as to what can be done about a structure that is so much higher and out of place in the neighborhood. When you're looking at, and I just picked a section here, all of the residential districts and, it's not commercial though, right? All the residential districts have a provision which allows a house, the front yard setback for any structure, to be modified to fit the neighborhood. And the rule is that if you are building a structure and it's between two other structures, you don't have to meet the 25-foot or whatever the setback is for that particular zone if the other structures are closer to the street than that. You can take the average of the structure on either side and use that as your setback rather than the required setback, because that helps keep the character of the neighborhood by not allowing, not forcing new structures to be so far back that they look out of place. Taking that provision and extending it, I simply extended that to height as well as front yard setback. So reading through this, and this is just for done for R1 here, but it can be done for, and should be done if accepted, for R1, 2, 3, R1, 2, and 3. And I'll read it. The setback: structures excluding steps and landings are not greater, and a landing not greater than 5 feet by 5 feet shall be located a minimum of 50 feet from any street or right-of-way. When a structure is to be built in an area where there are existing structures, the minimum setback may be waived, and the setback line may be the average setback of the structures on either side. The addition would be, this rule shall be known as the average setback rule, and shall not apply to corner lots or new subdivisions after enactment of this ordinance. This distance shall be known as the setback line. Moving down into height regulations, we would add this sentence, and I'll read the entire first paragraph. Buildings and other structures may be erected up to 36 feet in height in accordance with section 2.24, definition of building and structure height. No structure shall exceed 3 stories in height. Exception: enclosures below the base flood elevation used for incidental storage, parking garages, and means of egress shall be exempt from being considered a story if such space is less than 600 square feet in area. However, the height restriction still applies. To average the height as per the rest of the neighborhood, we would add this. Structures using the average setback rule, as we referenced just before this, as referenced in 3.3.2, must not exceed the average height of the structures on either side of the proposed structure. The building official may make minimum allowances for compliance with applicable flood zone and building code requirements. And the reason that last statement is in there is because the average setback rule for front yards was put in many years ago before flood insurance was required and before before some building codes were changed. So the reason that's in there is that the building official will have to give allowance to allow the structure to be built to base flood plus freeboard, which is 2 foot above base flood, and also make allowances for a new structure which allow a minimum height of, was it 8 feet? 8 feet per story, and a lot of the older homes have less than 8 feet per story. So that is the reason the building inspector would have some discretion as to that part of it. But other than that, these two changes would for structures built in an existing neighborhood to conform with the average height of the structures around them. That's only if that structure takes advantage of the minimum setback rule. If he sets back to 25 or 50 feet or whatever it is in that zone, he can build to the maximum height. The thinking is that this would keep the character of the neighborhood. And we put this, Mark and I put this out here for your consideration and review.
Thank you, Mike. It seems to me that I guess I've been on the planning commission for over 20 years or so, and we've always taken into consideration what could we do about keeping the look of Chincoteague somewhat the way it is and not having an impact with changes that would alter really the dynamics of the island and the reason that we came here and why you stay here and why other people come to visit us. So I think this is a fair way of approaching it. At the very least, it lets a developer know what the requirements are. It doesn't turn the area into a free-for-all. So, members of the commission? David?
No, I'm good right now.
I like it. I think it certainly goes through and adds a usable dimension to the regulations. However, I could see that at times the 334 paragraph 1 might be a little restrictive, but I don't think unduly so. And if that were the case, they could always appeal to the board. And so I think this is certainly an enhancement and an improvement of the current code.
I agree completely. I think it gives clarity where it's needed, and I think it's well written. So I would certainly approve moving it on the council.
I'd like to approve it. Stay there. I think it's good.
Yeah, I think so too. I think it's a really clean way to address what could be a real problem. So yeah, I would send it on to council as well.
I believe we can send it directly to council as a recommendation, or do we need to go through the ordinance committee?
You can send it directly to council. Of course, a public hearing has to be held before they could change the zoning law, but you can send us directly to council.
That'd be the quickest way to do it. I'll entertain a motion to do just that.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say by saying aye.
Aye.
So moved. Thank you. Item number 2 on our agenda is the comprehensive plan. And the intent this evening was to address some additions that we've been working on. We completed a comprehensive plan in 2015, which was accepted and approved, and that's what we work under at the present time. Every 5 years, the state of Virginia requires us to revisit the comprehensive plan to make sure that we're current with what issues have been taking place within that time frame, and also to look at opportunities to improve the plan or to address local issues that we had not foreseen. So we're in the process really of reviewing the 2015 plan so that we're ready to present a new plan the 2020 plan. So we're ready to present a plan in 2025. Having said that, we have a couple of items that we had already started to address, and one of them was sewage disposal. As you may have heard or may not know, there's a corporation that's out of Hampton Roads that has already begun the process of developing sewage facilities for not only Northampton but also for Accomack. And as part of that plan, as we are members of the Accomack County, sometimes we think that there's support, but we've addressed the issue of how we might meet the needs in the very near future, and then probably in the 10 to 15-year time frame future too. So having said that, we've developed a plan. It's a phased plan to present to not only to our council, but also to the developers to see whether they would be, whether it would be in compliance with what they have foreseen or what they envision. It's a very complex thing to bring sewage to Shinkaton. It was tough to bring water at times and concerned. So, having said that, Mike, I'm gonna.
Would you like me to read it?
Yeah.
Or you would like me to read it?
Well, just not the whole thing. No. I didn't know whether you had anything more on.
Yeah, Bob put this together and did a very nice job.
We'll let Bob do it then.
Sure.
Mike's been very active in this process. Yeah, actually, recent developments have been very good and fairly fast moving. So the town is taking advantage of opportunities that have been made available to it, and it seems to be working out quite well. One of the first events that occurred was that there was a court decision which had HRSD, Hampton Roads Sanitary District, take in Accomack and Northampton counties in their service area. And you may have heard about this over the past couple of years. Right now, they're very active in going through and developing or connecting systems in Northampton County and the southern part of Accomack County. If you drive south down 13 and they pulled up the old rail line and you saw this large pipe sitting on the side and now it's buried, that's the the drain system that's going down the county. So that's part of that. HRSD are experts in the area of sewage disposal, and they manage a large portion over across the Bay Bridge Tunnel over on that side of Virginia, and so their expertise is really appreciated coming to the Eastern Shore and being applied here. So once the court case was decided, the state legislature passed a code modification to go through and do just that, include Accomack and Northampton counties in their system. Around that same time, there are several open discharge private discharge systems that are licensed in and around Chincoteague. One of those serviced the portion of Main Street downtown. That facility has been made available to the town, and the town's taken advantage of that. So with that, HRSD came in, took a look at it, made some recommendations as to enhancements and improvements to the system, and the town has found funding to go through and do that. In fact, I noticed that the capital improvement plan for HRSD, which was released probably about a little over a month ago, already had the upgrade to this facility in their plan. So that's all looking pretty good. So then the question comes down to implementation of sewage within the island. When we looked at it, we defined a public sewer service area in the town of Chincoteague, and our PSSA totally encompasses the boundaries of the incorporated town. So at some point in time, the whole town is under consideration through the whole process. The immediate steps, the short-term steps, are again to go through and improve the existing facilities, expand the existing facilities, and then work out from there. Fortunately for us in this whole process, the HRSD was tasked by the state to go through and do a study as to what type of options are available to go through and service not only Chincoteague, but all of Accomack and Northampton counties. So that report should be coming out in about a year and a half, 2 years. So right now, we have defined basically 3 phases of implementation. These are based on the findings of the Wastewater Advisory Committee that conducted a lot of work, did a lot of work several years ago, and produced a fine report. It was well thought out and well structured. So we've gone through, taken the analysis in that report and defined the first several phases of the implementation. And you'll notice that they're in the commercial districts. So it services the high-use commercial.
Bob, if I may, can I just give a little bit more background on that?
Oh, sure. Go right ahead.
Thank you. To give some more detail on that, the town of Chincoteague now owns the overboard discharge plants at Sunset Bay at the condominium complex down there on Main Street. We obtained the plants from the original developer. The reason we were interested in the plants is because when we obtained them, we also obtained a permit that wasn't being used for another 37,000 gallons per day. That plant uses a different permit that's good for 39,000 gallons per day. But by taking the plant, the owner also gave us the spare permit. And anybody who's been around here for a while knows that they don't grow on trees. They're very hard to get. So now we have a plant that can discharge 39,000 gallons a day, and it is full. No one else can hook up to that. However, we also have a permit that's good for 37,000 gallons a day. By partnering with HRSD, they have agreed to upgrade the plant to where it can treat that extra 37,000 gallons a day. So that gives the town of Chincoteague that much capacity that we could use to provide sewage for what we envision being commercial areas in the downtown and along Maddox Boulevard. This is only envisioned at this point to be for commercial entities to hook up to. So when HRSD starts to upgrade this plant, once they upgrade it and we put a collection system in place, then we will begin to take applications from commercial entities to hook up to this plant. And that will give some of the businesses, for instance, downtown, who don't have enough land mass to even have an alternative system, it gives them a way to get sewage to operate a business down there besides something that doesn't require any water. Right now, as you probably know, the health department will only allow certain types of businesses in the downtown area because they basically have no sewage. So the town hopes that this will open up some possibilities for the downtown and also provide maybe some sewage for Maddox Boulevard as well. And if you look at this map, the blue line is phase 1. That's what we envision putting a collection system for this 37,000 gallons a day that we now have. And as I said, the town now owns that plant. Once we complete a few of these things that we're getting ready to do in court and get some of the basic details out of the way, we will be transferring that plant to HRSD. We are not in the sewage business. We don't want to be in the sewage business. That is HRSD's business, and they have said they will accept the plant. We have an agreement in place with them that once we complete these few things in court, they will take possession of it, and we still will not be in the sewage business. However, we will retain the right to connect businesses along Maddox Boulevard and Main Street. And what the Planning Commission is doing here, HRSD will only connect people or businesses on Chincoteague within the guidelines of the framework written by the Planning Commission. And that's what the Planning Commission is attempting to do here, is to come up with a framework by which we will connect folks. And that's what Bob has been working diligently on. So hopefully that gives you a background. You understand that it is not a sewer system for the entire island. It is not a sewer system for residents. It is a sewer system that's very limited, but will help provide some capacity to businesses in town that really need that capacity. So that's why we are interested in it. And at the same time, HRSD is doing a study for the whole north end of Accomack County that will hopefully identify a method by which they could treat sewage on the north end of Accomack County. Now, that's some years away, of course, but they are working on a study right now that will identify a method of doing that, whether that involves building a plant somewhere or whether it involves taking other people's plants and putting them all together. There's a bunch of things that could happen there, but that study is underway, and that's a number of years down the road. So I just wanted to interject that, Bob.
Oh, that's great.
Thank you.
In addition to that, we did go through and define this first phase of implementation in some detail, and again, did note that connections will be managed by the town and according to town guidelines. So with that, that's about all I had to say.
At this point in time, does HRSD need this from us at the present time?
HRSD, and we've been meeting with them since 2020, I think fall of 2020, and they made it clear at the first meeting that if we went through this deal and followed it through to the end and were able to give this plant to them to operate, that they would operate within the guidelines of what our planning commission came up with as far as connecting folks. So what Bob has done here, and Mark's worked with him, and Mark actually did the map you're looking at, is come up with a way to phase in the different commercial areas in the center of the island here so that they could phase 1, 2, and 3 so that we'd have an orderly progression as to which businesses could connect and when. And I will add that this extra 37,000 gallons a day that we have that HRSD is going to upgrade the plant to support, that's not where we're going to stop. We're still trying, or will be trying, to obtain additional capacity from the DEQ so that we can treat more sewage on the island. And I think everyone understands that continuing to put it in the ground, no matter what kind of system you have, is unsustainable. So there has to be a better solution to this. And I think the DEQ understands that from the folks that I've spoken with.
The wastewater committee that Mike referred to had been formed about 6 or 7 years ago. Mike was one of the members, Tom Clark and Scott, and they had come up with a very workable plan, but again, it was a question of funding and so forth and so on. And in the interim, HRSD came down, and I guess it's maybe 5 years ago, we had a meeting down in the college where they made the presentation, and our state representatives were all there, and they were looking at the feasibility of moving across the bay into Northampton and Accomack County and helping us where we seem to have a tremendous amount of problems. Right now, I don't know whether you've seen it in the papers or not, but Exmoor is going online with it. They'll probably be the first additional location. But so we're hopeful that, and again, this will be a long process. It's not a process that's going to happen overnight. And it's addressing the commercial areas first. I think we're right where we want to be at the moment. If we, your next conversation with HRSD, I guess, what else would they ask? Do they need counsel to?
What you're going to need to do in the proposal here, and the object this evening was to take Bob's proposal here, to take a look at it, tune it up, anything that needs tuning up, and then propose it to council to be included in the comprehensive plan. That requires, again, a public hearing.
Any commissioners have any comments?
There are just 2 TBSs, and they're references to documents, and I'd like to have those references satisfied. And with that, I'm fairly satisfied with it.
You got a joint public hearing?
Yeah.
Mike, we got a joint public hearing?
That's the most efficient way to get it done. I would make one suggestion, and that is to let me send this off. If you would like to approve it pending HRSD's review,
Fine.
Yes.
then I can send this off to HRSD and see if their project manager sees anything in there that's really not workable.
Sticking to points.
Yes. And once they review it, and they're fine with it, I'd say if you've approved this with that provision, then we could go ahead and offer it to council at the first meeting in June for a joint public hearing. You could also do the other change that you just made at the same public hearing.
I'll entertain the motion.
I'll make a motion to send this presented to the council with the understanding that HRSD have a chance to review and comment.
Second.
I have a motion, a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? So moved. Thank you all. They were the specific items that we had under the comprehensive plan that were documented. I'd like to go into, last month, I had requested from the commissioners that they take a look at our comprehensive plan. Again, with the intent to look at things that we might tweak, might add to the plan as we go into the 2025 proposal. As a result of the council's meeting on this past Monday, or the Monday before, I put at the top of my list marshland. And based upon the public participation of this evening, do any of my fellow commissioners have any comments or that they'd like to offer at this time? Or
I would say for myself that, a lot of good suggestions have been made here tonight. Specifically when you take a look at sections 5-7 through, I think it's 5-10, which addresses this. Denise spoke very well as far as some of the key items in the current section that talks about accessibility structures, lodgings, clubhouses, boat and kayak rentals, and then just a reference of filling in marshland. I would like to see staff bring us those sections, like something like what we did with the residential area requirements, mock up some, what a revision might look like for our next meeting, so the commissioners could take a look at it and possibly take action and pass it up to council potentially.
Sounds good.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask the extent of the revisions that you'd like? Do we just consolidate everybody's comments and take a stab at it, or would you like to offer a few specifics?
Specifically, I think just like was laid out in the comments that specifically addressed things like accessory structures.
In the letter that was read?
Right.
I had a mind, and this goes back somewhere here at the time, most of us was here at the time, when the Maddox Campground was developed and it was being turned into what it presently is. One of the major concerns at the time was the marshland at that portion of the island. That marshland extends across Maddox Boulevard. Part of it is right by the museum, but the rest of it goes back all the way to the townhouses on Little Piney Island. It was my feeling at the time, and since then, we have gotten involved with resiliency issues, retaining what we presently have due to whether you want to call it climate change or environmental change or whatever you want to call it, rising sea levels, so forth and so on. One of the aspects of that, and most of the folks who are experts, VMI, William & Mary, so forth and so on, is that marshland is just as effective in protecting you as bulkheads. Bulkheads raise you another foot or two, but they don't last forever. But the marshland migrates or stays the same. And the marshland is the home of crabs and eels and herons and egrets and small fish. And it's the only natural aspect that we have left on our borders here on the island. And I wouldn't be opposed to totally prohibiting any development on the marshland. You put a pier out on the marshland, oh yeah, it's above water. But take a look at what the bridge going to Assateague does, that bicycle bridge. What's underneath of it? Mud. There's not a blade of grass that grows under there. So I have no problem. I don't want to be too aggressive on the issue, but I want to express my own personal opinions to the commissioners and to our staff. I have no objection to any restriction. I mean, to the limiting of anything on it. My personal is, the marsh is God's gift to us. Let's keep it. So, any further discussion on the marsh?
Yeah, I consistent with what you're saying, I think we should make sure that we go through and take time taking a look at this, and make sure that we are consistent with other regulations. What came to mind real quick was because I had waterfront property at one time, and it's like, well, you know, if I were to bulkhead this, how far out could I bulkhead? And if I bulkheaded out far enough, could I use it for parking? So I think, you know, we as a commission need to go through and understand all the regulations that apply to this, so that what we come up with is consistent. Because there are there's definitely things that are done or can be done to the marsh that are very destructive and distractive. And we want to go through and make sure we protect against that. And it's not only marsh on the east side, but it's marsh, the freshwater marsh internal in the central part of the island, as well as some residual on the west side and on the areas across. So I don't think it's going to be like a one meeting quick shot, but you know, we should be very thorough about what we do, because it may be a while before we get a chance to do it again.
I had brought two little articles. One article was county planners recommend conditions for wetlands mitigation plans. And the fact that, oh, a guy wants to develop it so he can build wetlands somewhere else and take away what you have, you know. So they're looking at that. But there's also an article that was put in the Daily Post, was millions for marine restoration on the eastern shore, which is the first I've ever seen. It's always been the Chesapeake Bay. We got to protect the Chesapeake Bay. We got to clean up the Chesapeake Bay, and the eastern shore has been the baby that fell out of the crib. So, yeah. I just think we very definitely, and as Bob says, we got to stay within the rules and the right rules.
And it might be
to the extent that we can curtail the destruction of that beautiful piece of property, any of the marshland on the island, and we still have marshland at further end, south end, and you see what's happening down there. So, and there's marshland on the north end. You got not too many of us get an opportunity to see it, but it's there, and it does provide a balance, especially to this beautiful island. I'm sorry, Bill.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. It might be such a thing like Bob was talking, is something that's very, it's a lot of layers to it, but what we may need to do is take this in sections, or go ahead and act on what we know, and then build on it with additional suggestions over time, but at least to be able to go ahead and protect what we know may potentially be a problem right now, and then build on it from there, so it doesn't take several months to get something before council. At least we can get a start to them addressing it.
Yeah, although Mark doesn't have a formal request at this point in time, it could come in tomorrow. So it's not a case that we have a great deal of latitude as far as time goes. You okay with that, Mike?
Yes, sir.
You're gonna sit in on that, right?
What?
You're gonna sit?
Yeah.
Right. Having addressed that, we had, at the last two meetings, sort of discussed drainage issues and open. In our comprehensive plan, I wanted to take another look at our vacant land and open space, and whatever development issues we may be faced with, especially when it comes to drainage. Drainage is a big problem. The existing drainage that we have underground is controlled by the tide. When the tide's up, there is no drainage. When the tide's down, there is. And speaking of the marsh, not only Wayne Drive drains into that marsh, but so does Tar Lane. And Tar Lane, that drainage comes all the way over from Sunnywood Manor. That's not just around the corner, that's not just to your neighbor. That's a good distance away, you know. We had opportunities, we came before the Planning Commission, and I think actually might have gone to the zoning board on development on East Side Drive, where there was already development and so forth. But the development may have impeded the fact that when there's a high tide, the water comes back up the drainage point. If you remember at the bend down there where there used to be a beautiful restaurant, and there was concern that that would happen. So I'm really concerned that we have the appropriate vehicle within the comprehensive plan to it. The comprehensive plan provides the town with the opportunity to address issues. If it's not in the comprehensive plan, it prevents the town in many cases from really going and taking some active roles in issues that may come forward. So the comprehensive plan should be broad enough or specific enough to provide the town with the opportunity to address any potential issues and to maintain what we presently have. So, okay. So the drainage issue is a real concern from the standpoint of development. Somebody buys a piece of ground to meet the flood elevation requirements of FEMA, they raise it, and we have rules that say that runoff has to go to existing ditches or locations, marshland, but not onto your neighbors. Unfortunately, in most cases in the past, or in many cases in the past, we've had where development's taken place, the runoff inundates the neighbors. And then poor Mark becomes the guy who has to go out there and bear it upon it, trying to come up with a resolution. So, but I do want to address those are the specific areas I would like to see. Also, in the last Virginia Assembly, they changed some rules when it comes to the requirements of the Planning Commission and what's to be in the comprehensive plan. And one of those addresses what we call resiliency. That's the big word. That the resiliency is the ability to survive, in many cases, storms, weather events, high tides, inundation of other things. So we will have to look at the state code or the state requirements as it's been presented at our next meeting. I'll bring a copy for both the Senate bill and the House bill. They're the same in the governor's sign. So. Anything else on comprehensive plan? Bob?
No, but drainage is an interesting issue. Back, of course, in around 2010, the town did the stormwater study, and that was very interesting. A lot of just about all the recommendations out of that study had been implemented as of like a year or two ago. It did do rudimentary mapping of flows with it, water flows on the island, and we incorporated some of that data in the 2020 revision. However, I had gone through and taken a look at the problem, and the problem's fairly common these days, especially around this portion of the coast. So there's been multiple solutions that have come up and multiple tools developed that are readily available and usable to go through and evaluate drainage. So the existing recommendation in the comp plan and in previous comp plan was to go through and update and revise the stormwater study. However, I think we may be best to take a different approach and integrate some of the tools that are commonly available now, to go through and be able to do that. And I think in the last meeting I agreed to meet with Mark, and we could go through some of this. But it would take some time, so we'll take some time offline to go through and do that. There's a lot out there, so it's probably a couple months.
For purposes of explanation, Mr. Shendrick is our expert on the comprehensive plan. He has devoted hours, thousands of hours, to helping us reach the plan that we have, the 2015 plan. And he's always there. You have a question, you have a need, Bob's always ready to do that. And, the town should be thanked. We don't have a full-time planner. We used to. Unfortunately, a lot of that has fallen on poor Mark as the building inspector, but Bob has taken on a lot of the projects that really a full-time planner might have taken on. So, much appreciation. Thank you, Bob. Any other comments? Anything for the good of the plan?
It is good to see everybody out tonight. I would, and it would be nice if everybody showed up every meeting.
I know everyone has priorities in this world, has things that turn their button and so forth, and I'm glad this turned your button on this particular issue. But we meet every second Tuesday, so you're more than welcome to join us.
Second Tuesday of the month, sorry.
You're right, second Tuesday. Having clarified that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second.
Moved and second. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, so moved.